My name's Stephanie Austin, and I'm the director of the music project. This is our 4th annual presentation, and I am so thrilled to welcome you this afternoon here. You have a fabulous show. I heard them rehearsing, and you're going to learn a lot. You're going to have a really great time, and I'm just so happy that you're here. I'm so thrilled that Professor Silvester Henderson has agreed to do this for us. He has become a very dear person to me and an incredible supporter. And, you know, he's just a wonderful guy and a great musician. So would you help me welcome Professor Henderson and his rhythm section?
Good evening. Good evening. And I'm so glad once again to actually be able to come here. As Stephanie said, she's a real dear friend of mine. She asked me about a year ago if I would actually present a gospel lecture in terms of gospel piano style. And I thought about it, I said it's never been done before. But a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, one of the largest educators conventions in California asked me to do the same thing, which involved about 200 people singing. So actually what I'm going to actually do, these are my classifications. I went through about 3 years ago actually and classified gospel music into 5 categories. I did a lot of listening. I've grown up playing in the church, went to college and all those good things. And you know, a lot of times people hear about popular music, you hear about R&B, various types of jazz, swing, traditional, bebop, all those different things. But in terms of African American Christian music, no one has ever done that. And so I took the time actually to have these names sort of copywritten over myself, and also I took the time to sort of classify them. So we're going to sort of go through a journey of gospel music, and it will take about an hour, and we hope that at the end of the time that you would actually have learned something. What I'm going to actually do for each of the sessions, we are going to stop after each of the styles. I'm going to sort of explain to you why I've come up with these different classifications. You're going to hear some traditional things. You're going to hear some basic church music, some things that we changed, and we're going to go from there. Gospel music itself started around the late 19th to early 1920s with Thomas and Dorsey. Gospel music itself is really a large generic term. It's not just African American music. There is gospel music that is found in African American churches. And when people think of gospel music, they always think primarily of African American church, but there's all different types of gospel music. But primarily today we're going to concentrate on gospel music that is presented primarily in the African American genre. Mozart, who was born, I think around in the early 1700s, he was a major composer on the classical era of classical music. He used to use a variation, something known as theme and variation. And theme and variation is where you actually have a traditional melody that you play and you vary. Now I'm going to actually show you how sometimes when you actually hear a melodic line played, you can take that melody line and you can change it, because that is sort of I would say that is the basis in terms of how our first style of gospel music was created, what I call the gospel triathlon style. The gospel triathlon style deals a lot with music that is found a lot in your traditional Methodist or Baptist church. It's not found a lot in the non-denominational church or the Presbyterian church per se. It's found a lot in the African American traditional church. And I want you just to sort of listen to, first of all, just a simple example of theme variation. And once again, whenever you vary a melody, you can take a melody and you can change it. I'm going to use a simple childlike melody entitled Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And we're going to take that. How many of you heard that before? Raise your hands. Now, you know what? We're going to take that melody. I'm going to change it. You know, people do this a lot of times when you're watching a film. They'll take a melody when people are in love, and you know what? They'll play this beautiful melody. And if the man is crazy, they'll take that same melody. And as the man sort of gets ready to act crazier, they'll sort of distort the melody. We're going to start with just simple arrangement and show you how you can take a simple melody and sort of adjust and change it. Now this is just our traditional melody right here. this simple Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And I'm going to change it and make it sound happy for her. Very simple. Now I'm going to change it again. Very simple. Make it sound sad. Sounds different, doesn't it? I'm going to change it again. The gospel triangle style is something that everyone do this for me. One. Just clap on three. One. And we have a wonderful singer. We're going to see this traditional hand. You actually can see how this actually right there, this actual style of music right here, moving just three. Everything just moves in basically threes. Now we're going to actually let you hear our wonderful singer, Mr. Titus, our bass player, Mr. Elijah Green, and our wonderful drummer, Omar. Omar Maxwell. Come on, how do you do it? Now, our first demonstration, once again, is called the gospel triathlon style. Tri because it deals with music that is built around a rhythmic pattern of three. And we're going to use just a traditional hymn that you sometimes will hear a lot in the Baptist and Methodist church. Methodist church. Now, it's not going to be a gospel triathlon style, but I'm going to take it now and demonstrate how to take the same thing and change it again. How many students, how many people in here actually attend Contra College? Raise your hands for me. Okay, now, that sounded all different. It was the same song. The exact same selection. One was played traditionally, and we just sort of changed some of the rhythms and changed some of the feel and created a new song. Now, the project manager or the project director, Stephanie Austin, wanted me to actually take time between each of the styles to let some of the audience members ask questions. So here I am. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can you please repeat the date, the approximate when gospel started?
1920. 1920, with Thomas A. Dorsey. With Precious Lord Take My Hand. He actually started it as the result of, he had played a lot for a lot of the blues singers earlier, during the early 1900s. And what happened is actually his wife was pregnant with a child. He got a call that his wife had passed. And it was from that day on his way back to home where his wife was, he created a song entitled Precious Lord Take My Hand. And that particular song became sort of the basis of African American gospel music. Any other questions? Don't be afraid. I'm not representing the college today. I'm representing just the community. So you can feel free to ask me a question. Yes, sir. I don't want to do that. I don't have the music on me, but I have music I can play. Well, you know what? We're going to have to play that after for you. Any other questions? I'm going to let Omar answer that one. I don't know if Omar was prepared to start talking or not. Omar Professor Omar, y'all go ahead. Okay, you know what? We're going to actually move right now. How many of you have ever heard of the jazz composer and songwriter Duke Ellington? Now, many times when people go to your traditional church on Sunday morning, they're singing Duke Ellington. All these same folks that say, I don't want to hear jazz in the church, they listen to it right there on Sunday morning. Don't even know. I'm going to show you how. So that when someone says, well, you know, well, those chords are too jazzy. Say, no, you know what? Because the same chords they have in the nightclub, folks shout it on Sunday morning. Now, I'm like, the same music, but you know what? They don't know that. Now, we're going to actually let you listen to the style, our second style that we call the gospel swing, gospel shuffle. That was based on, there's something in the rhythmic phenomenon of music known as triplets. And when you take a triplet, I hit my wife, I'll give her a hand clap. When you actually take a triplet and you adjust it, you sort of adjust it and take the first two of the notes and combine them together and go to the second. You create this sort of shuffle feel where everything is offbeat, everything is syncopated. Everything is syncopated. That created a basic style in doing the jazz era known as the swing era of jazz. And Duke Ellington was a very well-known composer, and Duke Ellington composed a selection entitled Satin Doll. And I want you to actually hear how this particular selection, Satin Doll, served as the basis for what we call the gospel swing. Okay, we're going to have our wonderful tenor, Mr. Stark, sing the song for. You may have to be with me. I'm not so good at using this mic right here.
Over her shoulder, she digs me out, got me that sad love. When you shall go, I'll skip it. Careful where you go, your friend speaks like that sad love. Cigarette holder, she wakes me over her shoulder. She digs me
gospel swing shuffle. When you go to church on Sunday morning, you have a gospel swing. Will serve until I die. simple, right? Straightforward. Now, if I'm playing it, let's say Jared Farwell invite me to come to his church, pay me a whole lot of money, and live in the Baptist church. To come and play the same thing. On the battlefield for my Lord. I'm on the battle. I just changed the chords. I promised him that I would serve him till I die. I'm on the same thing. I just changed the chords. It would actually serve the congregation well. It would not encourage the congregation to do anything that is too rhythmically complex for them. However, it would add variety and sort of spice up what they already do. Just a tad bit, okay? There's also these sort of sounds you hear a lot in gospel music. Those are very, very complex sounds. Hear these sounds. Those sounds themselves you won't hear traditionally in Southern gospel music. You won't hear them in inspirational gospel music. Inspirational gospel music that is more for the non-African American church have generally more subtle sounds. Sounds that sound a lot like endless love. Very simple sound. Very simple and very what we call confident sound. Not deep sound. A lot of times you go to Pentecostal churches, they'll have a B flat chord playing over a D flat chord. The end with these sort of sounds, and they sound crazy. But you know, when people are shouting doing whatever, they don't even know what they're shouting to. They do the same chord. They think they're shouting to the Lord all the time, but they shouting, some of them are shouting to Duke Ellington and they don't know. Somebody gotta go back and say, you know, he said. Okay, so you know what I'm gonna ask, I just wanted to kind of go through, are there any questions before? We're gonna ask our wonderful singer, Mrs. Titus. Doesn't that have a wonderful voice? People actually come back and not sing along another gospel swing. We call this the gospel swing shuffle style of gospel music. He's going to actually come back at this time and present another basic hymn, By and By. That's another swing. By and by, when the morning comes, same feel, the exact same thing. All the fast water songs, English behavior, all those different songs follow that same basic framework of the African American gospel swing. Okay? But before Brother Starks come and we move to our next one, I want to ask, are there any questions that anyone want to ask from this particular style that we call the gospel swing shuffle style? What did I say?
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Confusion in regards to the Thomas A. Dorsey being the originator of the gospel. How do you classify the field followers?
Well, you know what? Those are more work songs. Gospel music primarily started with the variation of hymns as we know it today. Now, there were work songs and African American spirituals and things that came before that. But traditional gospel music as we know it today as African American officially started with Thomas A. Dorsey. He's the first composer actually that people know. There were people who influenced him before them, but a lot of those songs were field songs. Those were field songs and work songs.
So is that part of the triathlon?
No, the triathlon style was just one style of gospel music that I sort of classified, stating that in your traditional Methodist or Baptist church, a lot of times, a lot of the earlier songwriters would take your traditional Protestant hymns, and they would actually change the feel of the hymn. And most of the time, when they would actually change the hymn, it would actually always result in a rhythmic phenomenon that dealt with three. And primarily, if you listen to a lot of African American music, most African American music, there's always an element of three somewhere involved in it, rhythmically. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to ask at this time that Mr. Starks is going to come back and sing just another song from what we call our gospel swing shuffle style of gospel music, called By and By.
We are often tossed on this restless sea of time. Sunless skies and high tempest off the sea
So far we've looked at the gospel, what I classify, once again, these are my classifications for traditional gospel. And I actually want to make a comment. Generally, when you think in terms of the gospel piano player, traditionally the gospel piano player has not been a solo instrument. So instead they asked me to do this and say, well, you can never really be historically a gospel piano player because in terms of gospel music, the piano player generally plays off against the soloist. So very rarely will you go anywhere and actually hear just a recital of just gospel piano music. Because the whole purpose of the piano in the African American church generally, historically, has been to accompany a choir, has been to accompany a congregation. And so the piano player sort of plays off the soloist, and the soloist is supposed to be connected a lot, especially with creating what we call an African American element of creating spirit. And spirit in the African American church is what sort of, even though there's repetition, you hear a lot of times a lot of the repetitive phrases in the African American church, that repetition is supposed to evoke more energy and more passion and commitment to God. That's the basic element of gospel music, is a relationship with God. That's how the singer sings, that's how the musician is to play, and when the two work together, then they create a wonderful, authentic element that we call African American gospel music. Okay? Now, we're going to move to any other questions before we move to our gospel ballad. Are you learning something? All right. Gospel ballad, I think in terms of all the forms of gospel music, the ballad is the easiest to play in terms of, I would say, just playing per se. One of the difficulties I have with the ballad is primarily the ballad is not rhythmically difficult. That means there's not a whole lot of syncopation. There's not a whole bunch of rhythm that swing off and on. But generally the gospel ballad is based a lot on emotion and the chords and how you play the chords. I'm going to actually just play a song and show you how you can actually take a hymn. I'm just going to play the traditional Come to Jesus and show you how you can play that song, and I can actually take those same chords and you can create some sort of atmosphere. Generally, and I do it a lot of times in church. I'm a member of the Palm City Baptist Church in Hayward, and I try to do it a lot of times. I like to see people shout. I just do. Because people shout, it gives me encouragement. Because I'm not going to shout hard, but I can shout while I'm playing. So when they shout, I say, I like to hit that chord. You ever hit that chord, they shout. Or they start tapping their foot somewhere. And I like that. Okay, so people are doing it a lot of times. What happened is just that there was an era, I may be wrong, and Stephanie, if I am, correct me on this, I believe the Russian, Mussorgsky, would take Mussorgsky, which was the Russian composer of classical music, would actually, they created something within one of the Russian five, something pictured in the exhibition, something like that. They would, Mussorgsky, the goal of these particular selections was to create some sort of image, to create a basis, an atmosphere. And so he would take these chords, and he would take this music and sort of paint a picture while he's playing. And I a lot of times try to do that with chords. So if I'm playing this particular chord right here, let's say I'm playing, I'm having a hard time with this microphone again. See, I love to talk, so if I get comfortable, you're going to be okay. If I'm playing, come to Jesus, straight, Jesus, come to Jesus, just now, just straight, just now, come to Jesus, just now. within the restructuring of the hymn creates a different atmosphere. So if I'm playing this chord here, that chord sounds different than the following here. Sounds different than the following chord here. Sounds different, but it's based on the same chord. So I can play come to that's a new Franklin chord. He has actually music on 3 chords. It's down here. That's the new element of gospel. Everybody play those same 3 chords and make a whole lot of money. People shouting all around on 3 chords, this whole thing. 3 chords. And they create an atmosphere. That same atmosphere that people actually hear when they hear this. That soap opera song. That same sort of atmosphere that you create, because the whole goal in terms of trying to have effective music, especially for adjusting what is already created, because a lot of the earlier forms of African American gospel music was adjusted from hymns. A lot of the earlier forms were adjusted from hymns. In order to do that, you have to sort of create. You can use different harmonic ways of creating different atmospheres. So one of the things about the ballad is that the ballad is based on just creating a whole bunch of rich sounds. I think that's a pretty chord. That's a pretty chord. Instead of playing this, those same chords like this, playing like this. Sounds different, doesn't it? Instead of playing this, I like this better. It gives a different atmosphere. It gives a bass. I can't really necessarily describe it, but I think it creates an atmosphere where there's just a sense of peace. And I do a lot of listening. I've been listening to music for years all my life. And I really listen to music where a lot of people ask me, how do you learn to play gospel music? And I said, the first thing you have to do is to be quiet and listen. And so many traditional musicians who play a lot of Mozart, Costa music, jazz, and a lot of things, they want everything right in front of them. Now, the problem with that, if you need to learn to read music and learn all the basic things in music, but a lot of times when you play gospel music, after you've learned all that, nothing works unless it's heartfelt and you listen. Because African American tradition is built on listening. It's an oral tradition. And so even a lot of the music itself is an oral tradition. Where a lot of times in a non-African American church, let's say people, they're just really locked in to what they see. Now the difficulty with, the good thing about that is that they're visual. The difficulty is that when you're trying to take something and create an atmosphere that's real beautiful, sometimes it's hard to do if you just can't effectively listen. And one of the elements, especially for students who are music students here, that you want to actually always try to encourage is never give. Sometimes people have a difficulty in learning to analyze different intervals, but sometimes when I was coming up as a kid, I used to actually take my mother to tell. I used to tell this first song I learned to play was a song called "Show Me the Way," and I used to play that song over and over. My mother thought she was going crazy. That song I was good at 3 o'clock in the morning, because you know no one actually had music for it. The teacher played this for me, and I listened. And so now when I'm driving, whether it's popular music, whether it's gospel music, there are very few music forms that I cannot listen and I can actually visually see the chords and all while I'm just listening. A lot of times people are paid me to do something, and I don't really have time to practice like I should, because I have so many things going. I just pop the tape in, and when I get there, I'm ready. Because I listen to the song, I know the pattern, and I sort of structure it in my mind, and I can always tell, because so much of African American music is built on a pattern of fifths. I mean, most of the time, and you may not, some of you may not understand what that means. That means that if you think of just 7 alphabets in music, A through G, everything is centered around just those 7 alphabets. And a lot of times in African American music, everything sort of revolves around something they call a circle of fifths. So you have these second chords over and over. Gotta go to the microphone again. These same chords where if I do this here. Then I go from here to here to here to here to here, 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 back here, just the same circle. So it's this sound that you hear as you go off on television at night. Sometimes I think that's channel 2, channel 3, something like that. Those same chords that you have to hear over and over all the time. And so whenever you're playing gospel music, especially the ballad, in order to create a feeling of relaxation, you really have to be a great listener because harmonica is not difficult. Generally, the rhythms are, rhythmically is not difficult. The harmonies are generally very soft, okay? We're going to ask our singer again. He's going to come and sing a segment of what I think is a wonderful selection entitled God Is by Reverend Cleveland. And then we're going to go to the ending part of the song. That's the ballad. And we're going to try to just create a real simple atmosphere, just of a relaxing sound while you listen to this particular ballad.
Jesus, you are the center of my soul. Oh, Jesus, you are the center of my soul. Jesus, you are the very center of my soul. Jesus, Jesus, I love your name. Jesus, Jesus, my lady close. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, oh, Jesus, you are every center of my Jesus, you're the center of my soul. My soul. My soul. That is a typical ballad. Once again, the component of the ballad, the difficulty in the ballad is to create an atmosphere where you create a praise and worship atmosphere for the singer in Christian gospel music. Because you can't talk about gospel music unless you talk about the church. Because it's created for the church. And so even though I'm probably one of the few people who actually presented a lot in colleges on a large scale academically, the basic goal of gospel music is to praise and worship for the church. So you can't disconnect the church from talking about African American gospel. Okay, so we've talked about now what I classify our gospel triathlon style, the gospel swing, and the gospel ballad. Our next one is something that I call, it's based on the usage of 16th notes. Oh, yes. Yes, ma'am.
But it sounded like to me that you were in like, how do you say that? The regular chord and then, I'm killing myself out there again. Main chord and then the chord.
At the very end, that's correct. That's correct. At the end, it went from major chord to minor chord to seventh chord to sus, then to major chord. That's right. Because there were some minor chords and things involved in it.
It sounded like you were playing two different chords. I'm not really into my keyboard thing. He has three flats and then he has three sharps.
Well, three flats would be either E flat or C minor, and three sharps would either be A major or F sharp minor. I was actually in B flat major to E flat, two flats to E flat. Yeah, now give your hands out. Yes, sir.
I'm greatly fascinated by a piano solo by Ray Charles called Sweet 16, and I suspect that can be used to illustrate a lot of your points about the ballad.
Then possibly some of those can, because African American gospel music is a form of popular African American music as well, and so many of the musical harmonic elements cross over to other styles as well. So that's great. Any other questions? Yes. Well, the last song that we actually did was Richard Smallwood. Richard Smallwood is considered what they would call in gospel music the composer of the classical gospel song, where at the end of most of his selection, there's always some sort of build-up. Thomas Whitfield was also another composer. Now, the way I look at Thomas Whitfield is that he had different influences than Richard Smallwood. I think Thomas Whitfield, he passed recently, a couple of years ago. I think his music was a little more harmonically complex. He didn't really concentrate a lot on as much build-up, but he did concentrate a lot on these sort of sounds here. If I can go back to this again. Sounds such as this.
mic, man, that's right. He concentrated sound a lot. Whereas Richard Small would concentrate a lot on sound that would actually build. If you look at a lot of Richard Small chords at the end of the song, there's always a lot of time. This is very typical. But actually we take a chord and invert it. Whereas in Thomas Woodford, you don't actually hear a lot of music where the music inverts as much. That means that the melody line is one place, and then you take it and raise it up to build passion, but you hear a lot of complex chords. I think more complex than you actually hear in Richard Small. Any questions? Okay, now I think I got about another step. We got about another 20 minutes. And we got about a couple other styles to cover. Okay, our next one, are you learning something? Okay, our next one is what I classify. And once again, these are my classifications. I did the same thing for the California Music Education Association. We presented this to around 500 public school teachers all around California. The same presentation, but I actually used a choir of about almost close to about 150 singers to present the exact same thing. The next one is something that we call our gospel sixcopation. I call it sixcopation, six, because it utilizes the usage of the 16th notes. Okay, Omar, play some 16th notes for me. 2. And then also, this particular style of music is syncopated. Bum, 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 da, ba. But the basis of it are the usage of 16th notes. It's generally a medium style of choral music that's found a lot in the African American church. It's real easy to teach for a choir to sing. If you have a choir that's singing a multiculturalism, I use this style. It's one of my favorite styles of the gospel song. Most of the choirs that I work with in the Bay Area, at church, at UC Berkeley, or at LMC, we use these same styles over and over because it's a real easy style that get people to move. And it's something that's very easy, medium feel to it. There's a whole bunch of songs. It's a more traditional sound, but it's based on 2 rhythmic patterns. And generally, as you go from one harmonic area in a particular song, you always hit the same pattern. Bum, 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 da, da, da. You hear this pattern. Bum, bum. And you always hit that same rhythmic pattern. Da, da, bum, 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 bum. Always going from one phrase to the next. Now, we're going to actually demonstrate this particular song called All the Way. And I'm going to go to another composer and show you how the other composer has the exact same style, but he used exactly the same rhythmic pattern to go from one harmonic area. What that means is you go from one harmony, and as you're progressing, for instance, from this triad here, to this sound here, to this sound here, to this sound here, there's always going to be that same rhythmic pattern that's sort of used. Bam, 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 bam. That's always used in the middle of those phrases. And I call this the gospel sixcopation. Y'all give brother time to hand up again for me. Omar is going to demonstrate. Isn't this young man a wonderful drummer? Y'all give brother the wonderful bass, but he really like that. We're going to play 4 different rhythms at once. Omar playing 2. Bass player going to play the think that's a real simple, easy feel to fill a basic church form that's used a lot, and it's primarily built on what I said, the usage of nothing but 16th notes and sort of a syncopated variations around that bottom basic 16th notes. Any questions? We'll go to our last one. If not, we're going to go to what we call our gospel Costa blues, which is primarily built on the 12-bar blues. 12-bar blues, we're going to actually play, been around for a long time. Grassroots music back in the early 20s and 30s, even probably earlier than that. There's a particular harmonic pattern of usage in music. There's primarily 3 chords that are primary, 1, 4, and 5. And then there's a lot of things that happen around that. But primarily the basis of all the harmonies that deal in music are based on what we call primary chords. And the 12-bar blues, actually the 12-bar blues serve as the basis of what I call the gospel Costa blues. Now, once again, we call it Costa because the gospel Costa blues primarily comes from the usage of the singing that was happening a lot in the early years and even today in the Pentecostal church. The forefront runner in terms of people who primarily are innovative in terms of gospel music has always been from the Pentecostal church. African American Baptist church has always been good in terms of structure, but in terms of finding what is part of the quote acceptable norm, it has generally been the Pentecostal church who's been those folks that people call sort of crazy in a sense. Now, I'm not saying Pentecostal people are crazy. I'm saying we're talking about history. So the reality is that a lot of the things that you would hear in terms of what they call flatted thirds, sevenths, and all, at the gospel Costa blues, you primarily add 4 more measures to the 12-bar blues, and you create a rhythmic pattern that is really a blues pattern that is used in tons of Pentecostal praise song over and over all over the world. There's probably a million using that same pattern. But it's nothing but the 12-bar blues utilized in a particular manner and have an extension on the 12 bar. Now, what does bar mean in layman terminology? It's nothing but measure. And measure is nothing but a space in music where rhythms are found. Particular space in music. So this is what I classify as the gospel Costa blues. But I'm going to let you listen to a pattern of the 12-bar blues first. And you can actually hear how you have this basic chorus, 1, 4, and 5. Then we're going to go back and actually play 2 or 3 praise songs using that same pattern. But we actually add 4 measures and change some of the chords. I think that the second group, which we would have had on the screen, you can see them. And you would actually be able to hear some of the simplicity of it. But this form of music is generally congregational. It's not generally solo in nature, but it's congregational. It's sort of that call and response, where the preacher sings and the audience sort of responds to sing along with him. And I'm going to try to get Brother Titus to kind of get you to sing along with him at this time. He's been singing a long time. I think he's doing a good job. Good man, come on. Okay, so we're going to just play this basic pattern.
He's all right. Have you tried?
12-bar blues, add a couple of chords, and you create a pattern for 3 songs. There's tons of other Pentecostal songs that are based and built on that same pattern. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, very well. I think we are coming to the close of our presentation. It was just supposed to be an hour presentation. I want to make an announcement. First of all, I would like to, where's Stephanie? Y'all gonna y'all in their hands on me. While Stephanie is coming, I would like to just make an announcement. I'm also Professor of Music at the University of California, Berkeley, and the Young Inspiration Gospel Choir, which is my choir at UC Berkeley. There's some of those students back there, they sing the choir. They are they're getting ready for their annual concert. They are a world-renowned university gospel choir. They were labeled at the Smithsonian Institute as the finest university gospel choir in the world. They are giving their annual concert on April the 5th at the Presbyterian Church, and their guest this semester is a gentleman who's on a lot of recording with such artists as Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson. So I have flyers out in the vestibule area, would like to invite you to that. And also, I'm also a full professor of music as well at Los Angeles College. And our gospel choir, which is a wonderful community group, is getting ready for our 9th annual gospel celebration concert. I am so excited about this program because the city of Pittsburgh, and that's a big deal for me as an educator, to think that a major city, we have all not only the city of Pittsburgh, Martinez, and many of the other areas out there are co-sponsoring this event. This event is the largest event in East County. That means Danville, Salmon, Black Hawk, Martinez, Antioch, Pittsburgh, Rio Vista, all those cities are coming together to co-sponsor our largest celebration. Last year, we were able to attract generally 1,800 people. Generally in that area, the largest crowd people can sort of get together is about 7,800. The gospel choir at Los Angeles College brought almost 2,000 people together. And so I am so thankful for that. We are sponsoring our 9th gospel celebration. And when you're driving down Highway 4, you're going to see our picture on the billboards. I want you to look for it. We have some flyers for you that advertise that event as well. So we would love to just have you, if you would enjoy what you heard and would like to hear gospel music in its purest form, which you cannot separate African American gospel music from solo music, from singing. Because gospel music primarily is a vocal style of music that involves singing. I want to thank Stephanie for just asking me to come and do this. I actually left my own church. I would like all the people that came from my church, if they would stand. Sister Rye, y'all see that's Omar's wife and his baby right there. All the folks in the back came. We would like to thank all of them for coming. I also want my wife and my 2 kids to stand. Y'all can clap that, man. People on the ground. That's a sad night. And then my mother came as well. My mother is 87 years old, but she still looks good. She still gets a switch and books and things. I used to want to go outside and play baseball. She would tell me, this is your baseball. She was not some foolishness. This is your baseball right here. And I have a really dear friend that I really love to death. Him and his wife came all the way from Tracy. That's Martin and Louise Law. I have to understand it. All the greatest students that came to support me for this particular endeavor, from UC Berkeley, my gospel choir, I'm going to ask them to stand. And thank all of you for coming. Ask those students to stand as well. Those of you who don't know too much about African American gospel music, this will have given you some classification. I am going to write a textbook and going to put all this information down. I said this sort of came out of my desire to create a gospel piano class. I created a gospel piano class at Los Angeles College, which is the only one of its kind in education in the United States. I'm probably the only person who's ever taken the time to take gospel music in terms of piano music and sort of classify it into particular forms. There are some other things, probably 2 or 3 other styles that I left out that I'm still trying to work on how I want to classify them, how they actually fit the overall scheme. But these are what I consider the most 5 basic elements. Not all the elements, but these are what I consider the most 5 basic elements of a gospel song. We do hope that you would have learned something. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation. And those of you who are in this area, do support Miss Stephanie Austin. She is a wonderful addition to this community and to this college. And I wish her blessings in all the work that she does here in this part of West Carolina. Thank you.
For all of the people who come. Let's see what the Professor Henderson. Tony, one of us, Tony, there's one. Thank you. I hope you have a most blessed of Sundays, and thank you for coming today.